prophecy is a subject that has always fascinated people. The idea that certain individuals have a gift to see the future and accurately predict people, places, and things. One of the places where prophecy comes to life more than perhaps any other place is in the Holy Bible. Because the element of time is the essential ingredient in the phenomena of prophecy, it seems logical to present the most cogent example, that of Jesus Christ. Certain biblical verses are held by Christians to accurately predict key events in Christ's life. His birth in Bethlehem, the miraculous cures, his entry into Jerusalem on a donkey, his betrayal for 30 pieces of silver, his arrest and beating, and his crucifixion. A number of references in the Old Testament are taken by Christians as prophetic, and they indicate that Jesus Christ is the Messiah. Among the more striking examples are these: "But you, O Bethlehem, Ephratah, who are little to be among the clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to be ruler in Israel, whose origin is from old, from ancient days." The book of Micah. "Say to those who are of a fearful heart, be strong, fear not, behold, your God will come with vengeance, with the recompense of God. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. Then shall the lame man leap like a hart, and the tongue of the dumb sing for joy. For waters shall break forth in the wilderness and streams in the desert." From the book of Isaiah the prophet. "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Lo, your king comes to you. Triumphant and victorious is he, humble and riding on an ass, on a colt, the foal of an ass." From the prophet Zechariah. "And I took my staff, Grace, and I broke it, annulling the covenant which I had made with all the peoples. So it was annulled on that day, and the traffickers in the sheep, who were watching me, knew that it was the word of the Lord. Then I said to them, if it seems right to you, give me my wages, but if not, keep them. And they weighed out as my wages 30 shekels of silver. Then the Lord said to me, cast it into the treasury, the lordly price at which I was paid off by them. So I took the 30 shekels of silver and cast them into the treasury in the house of the Lord." From Zechariah. "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief, and as one from whom men hide their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we esteemed him stricken, smitten by God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgressions, he was bruised for our iniquities. Upon him was the chastisement that made us whole, and with his stripes we are healed." From the famous passage in Isaiah chapter 53. "Yea, dogs are round about me, a company of evildoers encircle me. They have pierced my hands and feet. I can count all my bones. They stare and gloat over me. They divide my garments among them, and for my raiment they cast lots." From the book of Psalms, chapter 22. These and other verses, of course, are not universally accepted as prophecies of Christ. In Jewish commentaries, the famous suffering servant passage of Isaiah is interpreted as referring to Israel itself and refers back to previous chapters. But to Christians, and to Jews and Muslims who convert to Christianity, Reading Isaiah chapter 53 shows them that someone had to suffer and die in order for the prophecy to be fulfilled. Another particularly famous set of prophecies come from the book of Daniel, particularly chapter 9. They are seen as having been fulfilled by Alexander, the great famous Greek general. The prophecy tells of a statue, and the parts of the statue were made of different types of metals and earth. Alexander became the great conqueror, and when he died, his kingdom was divided among his 4 generals, just as the divisions of the great statue. Some of the great prophets did not come from the Holy Bible. Some are popular to culture, such as the prophecies of Nostradamus. He is perhaps the most famous of all non-biblical prophets. He was born at Saint-Rémy in the south of France in 1503. He was actually first famous for his medical work with victims of the plague. His first collection of prophecies dealt mostly with the weather and was published as an almanac. In 1555, he published the first of 10 collections of prophecies. He had almost 1,000 in all. Unlike the Bible, he wrote his prophecies in verse. For the most part, he wrote in symbolic style. He chose not to arrange them in a particular order, or to make their interpretations, in many cases, known. He left them as matters of conjecture. Nonetheless, a number of the prophecies do seem to point to events that happened in later centuries. The first prophecy to bring Nostradamus fame was the following: "The young lion will overcome the older one. In a field of combat, in a single fight, he will pierce his eyes in their golden cage. 2 wounds in 1, then he dies a cruel death." 4 years later, in July 1559, King Henry II of France, who sometimes used the lion as his emblem, engaged in a jousting contest. The lance of his opponent pierced the king's helmet and wounded him. Henry died after a prolonged agony. So on the other hand, one can see how events can happen and then later be projected backwards to the alleged prophecy that was read. It's hard to find any that stand up to the scrutiny of those found in the Bible in reference to Jesus Christ particularly. Some critics, noting the veracity of the prophecies themselves, tried to say that they didn't count because the individual apostles and Jesus himself seemed to indicate that they knew they were purposely fulfilling prophecies from the Old Testament as they occurred. That argument is impossible to verify. It is also impossible to verify the prophecies of any prophet, even when they seem to point directly to an event. One of Nostradamus's was quite famous. The second quatrain was vivid. "Beasts with wild hunger will cross the rivers. The greater part of the battlefield will be against Hister. He will drag the leaders in a cage of iron when the child of Germany observes no law." This was later believed to be a clear reference to World War II. We also see the idea of prophetic gift inside the medieval church itself. A well-known prophecy regarding the papal succession had often been erroneously attributed to Saint Malachi Martin of Ireland. He was alive from 1095 to 1148 and was famous for his prophetic gifts. The predictions, though, were actually a forgery, first published in 1595. They consisted of a series of brief descriptions, 2- and 3-word phrases in Latin of 111 popes in sequence from 1143 to the presumed end of the papacy. Some are opaque and others are strikingly accurate. Just the last few, for example. Shepherd and navigator. John the 23rd was a shepherd and navigator and of the Second Vatican Council. Flos florum, flower of flowers. Paul VI served from 1963 to 78 and had the flower de lis as his personal coat of arms. The prophecy described only 4 more popes after Paul VI. From the half moon or of the middle moon referred to John Paul I, who was elected in 1978 and died only after 33 days in office. Next came Pope John Paul II, who was signified by de labore solis, from the toil of the sun, the import of which, so far at least, is not clear. The 2 popes after are signified as de gloria olivae, the glory of the olive, and Petrus Romanus, Peter of Rome. We know now that the glory of the olive must have referred to Pope Benedict XVI, who resigned. And after that, it left only Petrus Romanus, which, if Petrus Romanus is in fact the last pope, then it does make the circumstances strange that Pope Benedict XVI resigned to be replaced by Pope Francis I, a Jesuit, and Petrus Romanus. But these are the very fascinating points that make prophecy so interesting. A prophecy can be something as simple as scheduling a lunch date with somebody for a week hence. And then when it comes, do we say that we are masters of prophecy? No, certainly not. But still, it does seem strange that certain people seem to have this gift for telling the future, and then that future happens. Maybe, though, prophecy is not a gift at all, and it's just the synchronicity of things, the probability of things occurring. It's certainly not that hard to project and guess what human beings will do. We love mysteries, we love scandals, we love gossip, all the things we're not supposed to. And certainly when dealing with something like historic prophecy, there's a plethora of things to choose from when trying to take a small statement and find an event that matches it. You'd almost win 100% of the time. That is, except for the prophecies, again, back in the Bible. It's hard to take the same set of standards and the same skepticism and approach the prophecies about Jesus Christ and the prophecies written in the book of Daniel and be left with anything other than amazement. Talk to you next time.